Welcome, dear viewers, to a One Storyteller, the channel where stories come alive, where every tale is told with passion, depth, and a touch of magic. Today, we dive into a story that is as gripping as it is unsettling. A story that exposes the raw edges of society, the clash of power and prejudice, and the resilience of the human spirit. This is not just a story, it's a mirror reflecting the world we live in. So, grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's embark on this journey together. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in the small town of Willow Creek. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden hue over the sleepy streets. Birds chirped lazily, and the occasional car hummed by, breaking the silence. For most, it was just another day. But for Marcus Johnson, a 32-year-old Black Army veteran, this day would change his life forever. Marcus had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, earning medals for bravery and dedication. He had returned home with hopes of starting a new chapter, one filled with peace and purpose. But as he would soon learn, the battles he faced overseas were far from over. The war at home was different, a war against prejudice, against systemic injustice, and against the very people sworn to protect him. Marcus was out for his morning jog, something he did religiously to clear his mind and stay in shape. He wore his army hoodie, a symbol of pride and sacrifice, and his headphones played his favorite workout playlist. As he turned the corner onto Maple Street, he noticed a police cruiser slowly trailing him. He didn't think much of it at first, until the car sped up and cut him off. Officer Linda Grayson stepped out, her hand resting on her holstered gun. She was in her late 40s with a stern expression and a reputation for being tough on crime. But today, her demeanor was different. There was a tension in the air, a palpable unease that Marcus could feel in his gut. "Stop right there," she commanded, her voice sharp and unyielding. Marcus froze, confused. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, keeping his tone calm and respectful. "Put your hands where I can see them," she barked, ignoring his question. Her hand tightened around her gun. Marcus complied, raising his hands slowly. "I'm just out for a jog, ma'am. I haven't done anything wrong." But Officer Grayson wasn't listening. Her eyes scanned him up and down, lingering on his hoodie. "Army, huh?" she sneered. "You think that gives you the right to do whatever you want?" Marcus's heart raced. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was his own country, his own town, and yet he felt like a stranger, a threat. Before Marcus could respond, Officer Grayson drew her weapon, pointing it directly at him. "On the ground, now!" she shouted, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. Marcus's mind raced. He had been trained to handle high-pressure situations, but nothing could have prepared him for this. He slowly lowered himself to the ground, his hands still raised. "Please, officer," he said, his voice steady, despite the fear coursing through him. "I'm not a threat. I'm a veteran. I served this country." But Officer Grayson wasn't listening. Her finger hovered over the trigger, her eyes locked on Marcus as if he were a dangerous criminal. Passers-by began to stop, their phones out, recording the scene. The quiet morning had turned into a nightmare. The video of Marcus Johnson's encounter with Officer Linda Grayson spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had gone viral, igniting a firestorm of outrage and sparking a national conversation about racial bias, police brutality, and systemic injustice. For Marcus, the days that followed were a whirlwind of media attention, legal proceedings, and personal reflection. He had become an unwilling symbol of a much larger issue, and the weight of that responsibility was both overwhelming and empowering. The video, captured by a bystander on their smartphone, showed the entire encounter in stark detail. It began with Officer Grayson stepping out of her cruiser, her hand resting on her holstered gun. Her tone was aggressive, her body language tense. Marcus, calm and composed, tried to explain that he was simply out for a jog. But Grayson wasn't listening. The moment she drew her weapon and pointed it at him, the video became a lightning rod for outrage. By the end of the day, the hashtag Justice for Marcus was trending on social media. Celebrities, activists, and politicians weighed in, condemning Grayson's actions and calling for accountability. The Willow Creek Police Department was inundated with calls and emails demanding answers. Marcus, meanwhile, was struggling to process what had happened. He had always believed in the system, in the idea that justice would prevail, but this experience shook him to his core. "I served my country," he told his wife Sarah that evening. "I fought for freedom, for justice, and this is how I'm treated? Like a criminal in my own hometown?" Sarah held his hand, her eyes filled with tears. "We'll get through this," she said. "Together." The police department's response. The Willow Creek Police Department acted quickly, placing Officer Grayson on administrative leave pending an investigation. The chief of police, Robert Hayes, held a press conference the following day, his expression grave. "We take these allegations very seriously," he said, addressing a room full of reporters. "The actions depicted in the video are not consistent with the values of this department. We are committed to a thorough and transparent investigation." The investigation was led by Internal Affairs with assistance from an independent review board. Body camera footage, witness testimonies, and Marcus's own account were all examined in detail. The findings were damning. Grayson had no valid reason to stop Marcus, let alone draw her weapon. Her actions were deemed excessive, unprofessional, and racially motivated. As the investigation unfolded, the public outcry only grew. Protests erupted in Willow Creek and spread to cities across the country. People of all races and backgrounds took to the streets chanting Marcus's name and demanding justice. Signs reading "Black Lives Matter" and "End Police Brutality" were everywhere, a powerful reminder of the broader movement for racial equality. Marcus found himself at the center of it all. He was invited to speak at rallies, interviewed by major news outlets, and even contacted by civil rights organizations. It was overwhelming, but he knew he couldn't stay silent. "This isn't just about me," he told a reporter. "This is about every person who's ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. If my story can help bring about change, then I have to tell it." While the public demanded justice, the legal process moved forward. Officer Grayson was charged with misconduct, assault, and violating Marcus's civil rights. The case garnered national attention, with media outlets covering every development. Marcus was called to testify at the trial, a moment he had been dreading. Sitting in the witness stand, he recounted the events of that morning, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I served my country," he said, looking directly at Grayson. "I didn't deserve to be treated like a criminal." The defense tried to paint Grayson as a dedicated officer who had made a mistake, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict: guilty. Grayson was sentenced to 2 years in prison, a decision that sparked mixed reactions. Some felt it was a step toward justice, while others believed the punishment didn't fit the crime. For Marcus, the verdict was bittersweet. It was a victory, but it didn't erase the pain or the trauma. "This isn't the end," he told reporters outside the courthouse. "It's just the beginning. We have a long way to go. But today, we took a step in the right direction." While the legal battle played out, Marcus struggled with the personal toll of the incident. He had always been a strong, resilient person, but the trauma of being targeted because of his race left deep scars. He found it hard to sleep, haunted by the memory of Grayson's gun pointed at him. He became hyper-aware of his surroundings, always on edge, always waiting for the next confrontation. Sarah was his rock during this time, offering unwavering support and encouragement. "You're not alone," she reminded him. "We're in this together." Marcus also sought therapy, something he had been hesitant to do at first. "I didn't want to admit that I needed help," he later shared in an interview. "But talking to someone, processing what happened, it made a world of difference." As the months passed, Marcus began to find a sense of purpose in the aftermath of the incident. He knew he couldn't change what had happened, but he could use his experience to make a difference. He started speaking at schools, sharing his story with young people and encouraging them to stand up against injustice. He also worked with organizations dedicated to police reform and racial equality, using his platform to push for change. One of his proudest moments came when he was invited to testify before Congress about the need for police reform. "We can't keep pretending that this is an isolated incident," he told the lawmakers. "This is a systemic issue, and it's going to take systemic change to fix it." The investigation into Officer Grayson's actions was swift and thorough. Body camera footage, witness testimonies, and Marcus's own account painted a damning picture. It was clear that her actions were not only unjustified, but also rooted in racial bias. Within a week, Officer Grayson was fired. The police chief issued a public apology, vowing to implement new training programs to address racial bias within the department, but for many, it was too little, too late. Marcus, meanwhile, struggled to come to terms with what had happened. He had always believed in the system, in the idea that justice would prevail. But this experience shook him to his core. He found solace in the support of his fellow veterans and the countless strangers who reached out to him, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. The days following the viral incident were a whirlwind for Marcus Johnson. He had gone from being a quiet, unassuming Army veteran to a national symbol of resilience and the fight against racial injustice. The weight of it all was overwhelming, but Marcus knew he couldn't stay silent. He had a story to tell, and the world was listening. Marcus's first public appearance was at a rally in downtown Willow Creek. The square was packed with people of all ages, races, and backgrounds. Signs reading "Justice for Marcus" and "End Police Brutality" dotted the crowd. The energy was electric, a mix of anger, hope, and determination. When Marcus stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. He took a deep breath, gripping the microphone tightly. He hadn't prepared a speech. He decided to speak from the heart. "I never thought I'd be standing here," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I served my country. I fought for freedom, for justice, for the idea that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. But what happened to me on that street, that wasn't justice. That wasn't freedom. That was fear. Fear of the color of my skin. Fear of who I am." The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "But I'm not here to talk about fear. I'm here to talk about change. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because of all of us. It happens when we stand together, when we demand better, when we refuse to accept the way things are." By the time he finished, the crowd was on its feet, chanting his name. Marcus felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, his story could make a difference. In the weeks that followed, Marcus was inundated with interview requests. He appeared on national news programs, podcasts, and even late-night talk shows. Each time, he shared his story with the same honesty and passion. On one particularly memorable show, the host asked him, "Marcus, you've been through something unimaginable. How do you find the strength to keep going?" Marcus paused, considering the question. "It's not easy," he admitted. "There are days when I want to shut the world out, when I feel like the weight of it all is too much. But then I think about the people who've reached out to me, veterans, mothers, fathers, kids, telling me that my story gives them hope. And that's what keeps me going, knowing that I'm not alone, that we're in this together." Marcus's advocacy didn't stop at speeches and interviews. He began working closely with organizations dedicated to combating racial injustice and supporting veterans. One of the first groups he partnered with was Veterans for Equality, a nonprofit that focused on addressing systemic racism within the military and law enforcement. At a meeting with the organization's leaders, Marcus shared his vision. "We need to do more than just talk about change," he said. "We need to take action. That means pushing for policy reforms, holding people accountable, and supporting those who've been affected by this kind of injustice." The group quickly got to work, launching a nationwide campaign to raise awareness and push for legislative changes. Marcus became the face of the campaign, traveling across the country to speak at events and meet with lawmakers. While Marcus focused on advocacy, The legal battles surrounding the incident continued. Officer Linda Grayson, now former Officer Grayson, faced criminal charges for her actions. The trial was highly publicized, with media outlets covering every detail. Marcus was called to testify, a moment he had been dreading. Sitting in the witness stand, he recounted the events of that morning, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I served my country," he said, looking directly at Grayson. "I didn't deserve to be treated like a criminal." The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict: guilty. Grayson was sentenced to 2 years in prison, a decision that sparked mixed reactions. Some felt it was a step toward justice, while others believed the punishment didn't fit the crime. For Marcus, the verdict was bittersweet. It was a victory, but it didn't erase the pain or the trauma. "This isn't the end," he told reporters outside the courthouse. "It's just the beginning. We have a long way to go, but today we took a step in the right direction." As the months passed, Marcus found a new sense of purpose. He had always been a soldier, a protector, but now he was also a leader, a voice for the voiceless. He continued to work with organizations, speak at events, and push for change. One of his proudest achievements was the creation of the Marcus Johnson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting veterans and combating racial injustice. The foundation provided resources, advocacy, and a platform for those who had been marginalized or mistreated. At the foundation's launch event, Marcus stood before a crowd of supporters, his heart full. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about all of us. It's about creating a world where no one has to go through what I went through, a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, no matter the color of their skin." Marcus knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But he also knew he wasn't alone. He had the support of his family, his fellow veterans, and countless strangers who believed in his cause. As he looked out at the crowd, he felt a sense of hope. Change was possible. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen. And he would be there, fighting every step of the way.